That's a new thing I'm doing. It's called Sexy Time with Kris. You like that, weirdos? All right, I'm done with that. This is the real story of demon possession. This is another creepy, spooky, disturbing, Halloween-y thingy from Infographics, I believe, and let's just do it.
It was June 6th of 2013 when an old Bavarian home went up in flames. Someone claimed that they could see the outline of a person in the smoke. Could this be the spirit of a young girl from nearly 40 years ago? A girl who many believed was possessed by up to 7 demons and who both lived and died in the same building. Let's look at what once took place in the now destroyed property in this episode of the Infographics show, The Exorcism of Anneliese Michel. Anneliese Michel was born in West Germany in September of 1952 to a middle-class family who lived in a white house with green window frames. She had 3 younger siblings, all girls.
Sorry, my fiber optics need to catch up, so maybe if I pause it and kind of give it a second. How's everyone doing today? Okay.
Parents were Roman Catholics and she was raised religiously, attending Mass each and every week. However, her seemingly normal, albeit strict upbringing veered off course when she turned 16. This was when she had a sudden and debilitating seizure and was diagnosed as having temporal lobe epilepsy, or TLE. The condition causes seizures that last between 1 and 2 minutes. It's possible for those diagnosed with this disorder to remain fully conscious. They'll have hallucinations of the senses, visual distortions, dissociation, déjà vu, amnesia, anxiety, and other strong emotions. The seizure may end there or progress to an impaired awareness type in which consciousness is affected. This may cause individuals to stare unmoving, move reflexively, or be unable to speak, read, or understand words. They may also feel confused or struggle with communication. This seizure may even spread further to become a generalized type where the whole body will tense up and jerk. After seizing, someone may be disoriented for a span of minutes to days. Clearly, the
seizures suck. I've never had one. But the human body is amazing, but at the same time, it's just a dick.
condition can be life-changing. The good news for Anneliese is that though she had more than one, she still didn't have very many. Though the few she had in combination with other problems were enough to destroy her very well-being. It was June of 1970 when she had her third. At the time, she was a patient in a psychiatric hospital and was given an anticonvulsant medication to help her with her symptoms. However, these didn't seem to work. In fact, her situation became worse. She started to hallucinate and see the faces of demons. Further, she would believe that she was smelling fire or feces that weren't really there, as well as develop paralysis of both arms. Based on this, the doctors added the drug Owlept to her anti-seizure medication. This was typically effective for cases of schizophrenia and other forms of delusions. As many with TLE do, she became depressed. She started to hear voices as well while she was praying. These would taunt her and say she was damned and destined for hell. Despite the doctor's best efforts, by 1973, her mental health only continued to grow worse. She also became more and more depressed. After years of medications and treatments and without any improvements, she considered an alternate prognosis that required an entirely different form of intervention. She believed that she was possessed by demons and could only be saved through exorcism. The reason she believed she was possessed was because her mother had had a child before marriage, and so the curse for her infidelity had been passed on to her. The illegitimate child was seemingly cursed too, as she died while undergoing surgery in 1956. Others supported this idea. A family friend was convinced of Anneliese.
If medicine isn't working, you can't... How do I phrase this? If the medicine isn't working, you can't keep taking it. Legally, you can't keep taking it. It's not going. If it's not helping you, then you can't keep taking it. But you got to be careful with too much medication, because you can become immune. And there's somebody I know who's currently dealing with a situation where his gut bacteria is it's doing harm to him, and he had to get a fecal transplant. What's that, Kris? What do you think it sounds like? He had to get healthy shit put up into his colon so that the good bacteria, the good bacteria in there might spread, and the bacteria in the gut might kind of snap out of what they're doing because he's losing weight. He's going through problems. But yeah. Anyways, the medication thing, if all that other stuff isn't working, then yeah, maybe it's time to seek alternative options. And I'm not saying like, a witch doctor or something like that, but maybe it is an exorcism that you need. I don't know.
Lisa's possession once she visited her and displayed oddly religiously intolerant behavior. This included the refusal to walk by a crucifix or drink any holy water from a spring. In fact, she couldn't even enter the shrine that the spring was in, as she had the sensation that the ground was burning under her feet. Those praying also looked to her as if they were frantically gnashing their teeth, and the pictures of the Holy Trinity sparkled blindingly. These symptoms convinced many beyond her family that there really was an evil spirit in her. Her parents began to contact priests in hopes of saving her with an exorcism. At first, their requests were met with refusal and the suggestion of seeking only medical forms of treatment. Further, the priests explained that such rites required the bishop's approval. This would only be granted in the case of several specific circumstances.
I think that with all the treatment that she's gone through, they could present that and be like, look, this is what we've medically been going through. And I think that once you see that they've tried, then I think you're going to have a little more trust in, okay, well, let's see if this is the right next step. Not saying it is.
In other words, certain conditions would have to be met that help determine whether or not an individual was truly possessed before any action could be taken. The Catholic Church's terms for possession was infestation, and some of its documented first signs included feelings of repulsion for religious or supernatural artifacts. Clearly, as far as this, Annalise fit the bill. However, she was still not given the exorcism that she wanted so badly. Instead, she developed several further unusual behaviors. She began to act violently and bite her family, and also hurt herself. Further, she started to consume her own urine, as well as flies, spiders, and coal. Rumors are that she even bit off and swallowed the head of a bird and went under a table and barked for days. Not very surprisingly, considering what she ate, she would have periods of diarrhea and vomiting. She believed that all of this was due to her past wrongs and began sleeping on the...
Oh my God.
Bruce was Gotham.
Was he really? Sounds great.
And sleeping on the hard stone floor as a self-imposed punishment. Her situation was becoming quite desperate. In late 1973, she began the medication Tegretol, meant to stabilize her emotions as well as prevent her seizures. Like before with the other drugs, it did little to help. Ernst Alt, a pastor, ended up contacting Bishop Josef Stangl on Annalise's behalf in support of an exorcism. His support was based upon his observations of her, in which he concluded that she didn't seem like an epileptic and had never, as far as he had noticed, had a seizure. Instead, he believed her symptoms were due to the work of demons. Finally, in 1975, the bishop gave his approval to the Michels family's third request for an exorcism. The procedure was to be performed by priest Arnold Renz, and he was to do it in complete secrecy. The first session took place in September of 1975. 66 further sessions would follow, up to twice weekly for 4 hours each, and over the span of around 10 months. These would consist of Father Renz and Pastor Alt moving crucifixes back and forth, burning incense, and chanting prayers. Then Annalise would scream for hours in unreal and primal sounds. It seemed to be working when the many demons within her vanished except for one. Until the next day, when the rest returned. Somehow, they didn't give up. In fact, Annalise asked her family to discontinue looking to doctors for medical treatments in favor of relying only on exorcism. They followed her wishes. Eventually, as her treatments went on, Annalise stopped eating or drinking. she said that the demons would not let her. According to some sources, Annalise eventually requested the exorcism to end. She claimed that the Virgin Mary had come to her in a vision and asked her to stay possessed to benefit mankind and to become a martyr. She obeyed. Quite eerily, she apparently knew the day she was going to die and accurately predicted it beforehand. She died on the 1st of July, 1976. The official cause of death given was malnutrition and dehydration. It was determined that she had been in a state of starvation for almost a year. In fact, her corpse weighed only 68 pounds or 30 kilograms. Not long before, she had become so weak that she could no longer move on her own, and the motions required for her exorcism had shattered both of her knees. She may also have been suffering from pneumonia. She told her exorcist to beg for absolution, and her mother that she was afraid. Those were the last words she would say. She was only 23 when she died. Her parents and the priests involved were prosecuted and accused of negligent homicide upon her passing. It was suggested that an intervention could have saved her life at any point up until days before she ultimately died, such as through force feeding. Doctors gave testimony that Annalise was not possessed, but her symptoms were only because of her epileptic episodes mixed with her religious beliefs. Some experts suggested that she had a very severe case of schizophrenia. However, it was revealed that at least one such doctor had told Annalise that there was no type of medicine that could fight the devil, destroying his credibility. As proof of her possession, tapes were played in court of the exorcism sessions, in which Annalise spoke in different voices as if demons were arguing. These evil spirits claimed to be Nero, Hitler, Judas Iscariot, Cain, and Lucifer. In other words, her body was not just possessed by one demon, but many, and
she was possessed by a who's who of scumbags.
certain times, this was up to 7. She would also speak in various languages, such as Aramaic, Latin, and Greek. Ultimately, those directly involved believed that the exorcism had been successful, as these strange voices ended right before her death. Whether or not this was true, lawyers argued for freedom of religion and against any sentencing. However, the stakes were not as high as they could have been. The state pushed for fining the priests, and the prosecution believed that the parents had suffered enough already. Therefore, no parties faced jail time for what they had done. They were originally convicted of manslaughter due to negligence and given a 6-month jail sentence. However, this was suspended. They ended up with only 3 years probation, which was a greater sentence than the prosecution had asked for, but was far from the worst punishment possible. After it was over, the body of Annalise was exhumed at the request of her parents. She was then placed in a better coffin. However, that was not the real reason her parents wanted access to her body. It turns out, a nun from Bavaria had a vision and afterwards contacted Annalise's parents to share it with them. She had supposedly seen their daughter's remains unchanged and perfectly preserved in her coffin. They had hoped that this was actually true and that it would show that she was really possessed and ultimately saved through exorcism. Her body, however, as any other body would do, had begun to decompose with time. Despite this finding, interest in her case continued. Her grave even became a revered site where many visited on a pilgrimage. Then the buses came, stuffed door to door with tourists who were eager to see where Annalise had lived, her grave, and the chapel erected in her memory. These people who had a fascination with the case came by in droves and quite overwhelmed the small Bavarian city. The church was dealt a blow through the negative publicity. It did eventually have a change of opinion and state that she was likely mentally ill and not possessed, but damage had already been done. The rate of exorcisms declined. This likely won't change anytime soon. As recently as 1999, the new pope made the rules governing exorcisms tougher and approval much harder to get. But were they ultimately right, or were they wrong after all? It may just be a coincidence, but in May of 2013, the garage of the chapel built for Annalise burnt down. While a faulty light was found nearby, a police spokesman later claimed that that would be a very odd and atypical way to start a fire. Then, 3 weeks later, the home in which she both lived and died was engulfed in flames. Fortunately, it was empty and had been since her family no longer lived there. Rather unsurprisingly, no one else wanted to move in. While some think demons are to blame, the mayor of the town claimed that it was arson committed by teenagers. If it was the work of children, all we can say is that they picked quite a day to burn down the home. June is the 6th month of the year. That Thursday was the 6th day in the month, and the sum of the digits in the year 2013 give you a 6. That's 3 6s, or 666, the biblical sign of the devil. Is it just another coincidence, or is it really an indication that what others feared could be true really was all along? What do you think? Let us know in the comments. Also, be sure to check out our other videos.
On June 6th of 2006, yep, I was riding on a trail and I found a snake. It was alive. I took a picture of it and then I went about my way. It's gone. We cross paths. We text occasionally, email, sometimes phone calls, but he's got his own things to do. He's living life. Was this the Annalise? Was this Emily Rose? Did it say? Was I not paying attention? I haven't been drinking yet. Should I be drinking? I probably should be. Well, what Greek parties were actually like. Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and end this here. I'm sure you're scared. Like and subscribe, or clowns will come back and eat your face. Cannibal clowns. Killer clowns. Killer cannibal clowns from outer space.